Okay, you have picked your photograph, you've got your paper. What do we do first? Well, the first thing we need to do is figure out where our horizon line is. The horizon line is that place where the sky and the ground come together. And remember, that is totally dependent on where you're located. But in the case like this, where we're using a photograph, that's already pretty well established. It's not going to move on you. And we can see that really the only place it's visible is between the building and the cars in the parking lot here. There's just a small area, but that's where it's happening, right there, almost in the middle of the page, just a little bit higher than the middle of the page. So next, we need to translate that over onto our drawing paper. So it's a little higher than middle. So if this is the middle, we're going to go up just a little bit higher. We're going to use our T-square to make sure that the line we draw is truly horizontal. So the short end is lined up with the side of our page, and I'm going to go a little higher than the center, than the middle of the page, top to bottom. And I'm going to make it a little bit long because I'm doing it with a pencil, so I can always erase the part that I don't need later on. I'll do that a little darker so you guys can see. And that's my step one, establish the horizon line. Step two is going to now be to establish the vanishing point. Where is that vanishing point located? So if we look at the photograph here, the best thing to use to determine this is the roof line of the building. The curb on the sidewalk is a little bit unreliable because it curves as it heads down away from us. So this building right here, the top edge of that roof line is going to give us a pretty accurate determination. Where that line, if it continued, runs across the horizon line, which is right here, that's our vanishing point. So again, we want to ask ourselves where on the page it is. In this case, we're looking at left to right. And if the middle of the paper is here, we notice it's just a little bit to the left of the middle of the paper. So now we come over here. If this is the center of the paper, we're going to come over just a little bit. That's how we start this thing. We establish the horizon line, we establish the vanishing point. Well, then what do? Well, then we start drawing. I get to pick something, and I'm going to pick something that is made of parallel lines that are affected by the vanishing point. So the first thing that jumps out at me is the sidewalk, the curb here. So again, I'm going to be kind of estimating, if this is the middle of the page, it's a little bit to the left of the middle. So here's the middle. This is a good spot to start. And then I'm just going to connect them, the mark I just made, to my one and only vanishing point. Remember, this is 1 point perspective. How wide is that curb? About like that. Okay, so now I'm started. What about the building? How far up on the page does the building go? Well, it goes almost to the corner, but not quite. So maybe about in here. Okay, again, I'm drawing with a pencil, so I can just draw some lines and I can go back later and decide if they're too long or they're too short. But that's going to be the top of my building. There's another parallel line underneath it, down a little ways, about right there. And again, I'm going to line up to my vanishing point. So now there's the top of my building. I could do that for the road over here. I can do that for the curb here. I can do that for this edge of the sidewalk. Any number of things that are going to be connecting to that vanishing point, which means it's an orthogonal line. An orthogonal line meaning that it goes to the vanishing point. So here's my other sidewalk line. Now, what do we do from there? Well, we're going to need some vertical lines. How do we draw a vertical line and know that it's a vertical? Well, we have to rely on our T-square. We have to line the top of the T-square up with the top of our paper. That is the only way to make sure that the lines we draw are truly vertical. So I'm going to just start drawing some lines here. So this is going to be the front of the building. It's a little bit taller than the lines I drew previously. I'll come back and put a top on it later. And then I know I'm going to have another vertical in here and another vertical in here. I'm going to need some verticals for my windows. So I can draw several kind of all at one time just by sliding that T-square around, just doing my best to keep it nice and straight up and down. Now, what about those windows? How do we finish those windows off? How do we make sure that the top and the bottom of them are making sense with this idea of linear perspective? Well, we use our vanishing point. So we're going to line up to that vanishing point. And same thing at the top. Top and the bottom of our windows are going to be orthogonals. And then I can just erase the part I don't need there. I'm going to do a little bit more erasing in here. I don't need my horizon line to be quite so long, and I don't want it to confuse anything. So I'll get rid of some of that. And I need to finish off this little section here that represents the front of the building. The top of it, just like the bottom of it, is going to be an orthogonal. But what about this side of it, this line right here, this part that juts out and is actually facing us? Well, this is one of those rare times where we're going to need a horizontal line. And how do we do that? Well, we put our T-square on the side of our paper and let that go straight back and behind the building there. Okay. There's a little more building to the right of that tall section, so I can add that in by just adding another vertical over here. And then there's some more building that kind of heads off down closer to that sidewalk. So again, I'm going to erase the parts I don't need, kind of clean it up a little bit, and hopefully it starts to look like something. By the way, this wall here, if it's a horizontal line at the top, then it's got to be a horizontal line. At the bottom, well, no, that doesn't look right. That's because we need another orthogonal from that point. Okay, so this is actually that grassy area between the sidewalk and the wall there. Okay, so we can just start picking things apart here. We can see this little driveway entrance way back there at the high school, and that's going to be facing us, which means it's basically made up of verticals and horizontals. So anything that's front facing is not impacted by the vanishing point. So something a little bit like that. Our sidewalk, if we look real closely here, we see it actually curves when it gets way back there. So we could then, once we've established some of that framework for the big structures, we can go in and start putting some of those other little details in. Just don't ever get rid of your vanishing point. You're definitely going to need that, so you're going to want to make sure you save that and don't erase